close your eyes for a moment and let the modern world slowly fade away. The hum of electricity softens, the sharp edges of the present dissolve, and in their place rises a colder, darker landscape. Stone replaces glass, smoke replaces light, the air smells of damp earth, animal fat, and old wood. Somewhere far away a bell tolls, not to mark the hour, but to remind everyone that time belongs to God, not to you. You're no knight in shining armour. You're no lord, no monk, no peasant bound to the fields. You live in the narrow spaces between laws, between loyalties, between prayers and sins. You live in the shadows of medieval society, where survival depends not on honour, but on secrecy. Tonight you will slip into the uneasy life of a medieval assassin, not the romantic figure of legends or games, but a human being made of fear, hunger, obedience and doubt. A person whose hands shake in the cold, whose stomach knots before every task, and whose nights are haunted not by glory, but by faces that do not fade. You will discover how such a life begins, often in childhood, when violence is not chosen but inherited. You will learn how bodies are trained to move silently, how minds are bent to obey, and how souls are slowly worn down by waiting, watching, and killing up close. You will feel the weight of anonymity, the terror of being recognized, and the constant knowledge that one mistake means torture, disgrace, and death. This is not a tale of heroes. It is a journey into exhaustion, paranoia, and quiet despair. As you settle into this world, let your breathing slow. Let the story carry you gently, step by step, through streets lit by torches and moonlight, through rooms where whispers are more dangerous than swords. And if this journey speaks to you, consider subscribing to the Everyday Life in History channel, so you do not miss the next nights of history. You may also leave a small comment saying where you are listening from tonight, before sleep finally takes you. A simple gesture before we begin. Now you are ready. Long before you're able to name fear, your body already knows it. It settles into you quietly, like cold creeping through stone walls, like damp rising from the ground. You grow up in a medieval world where danger is not exceptional, but expected, and where safety is never permanent enough to be trusted. Your earliest days unfold in narrow spaces, rooms shared with too many people and too few possessions. The air smells of smoke, old fabric, and human closeness. Light enters only through small openings, and even during the day, shadows cling to the corners. From the beginning, you learn that visibility is a form of exposure. Adults around you speak in half sentences. Conversations pause when strangers pass nearby. Names are sometimes avoided altogether. You do not yet understand why, but you understand that questions are unwelcome. Curiosity is gently, then firmly discouraged. Silence, you're taught without words, keeps people alive. Violence is present without being theatrical. You hear it before you see it. Raised voices in the street, the dull sound of blows behind closed doors, the sudden stillness that follows a disturbance. Occasionally you see the aftermath. Blood darkening dirt, a body carried away, a home left empty. No one explains much. Explanation is a luxury. As a child, you learn by observing. You notice how some men walk with confidence, while others keep their eyes lowered. You notice how certain colours, symbols, or accents change the way people are treated. You notice that justice does not arrive evenly, and that strength does not always come with armour or titles. Your family lives with constant tension, even in moments of calm. Meals are quiet. Laughter exists, but it is brief and cautious, as if too much joy might invite attention. You learn to eat without wasting, to sleep lightly, to wake quickly. Hunger is familiar, but it is not dramatic. It is simply there, a dull companion that shapes patience and endurance. At night, the world does not rest. You lie awake listening to sounds that seem amplified in darkness. Footsteps on stone, a door creaking open, a shout carried by the wind. Every noise suggests possibility. Every silence feels temporary. Sleep comes slowly, and when it does, it is fragile. You're not taught to fight yet, but you are taught to endure. You fall, you bruise, you bleed, and you are told to stand again without complaint. Pain is acknowledged only briefly. Weakness is something to be corrected, not comforted. In this world, survival depends on resilience, not sympathy. Play, when it happens, is shaped by the environment. Children chase each other through alleys, hide behind carts, balance on walls and beams. These games sharpen reflexes and awareness. You learn where to run, where to disappear, where to wait without being seen. Even amusement feels like rehearsal. You also learn that adults are afraid, even if they pretend otherwise. You see it in their eyes when authority passes nearby. You hear it in the way they speak about lords, soldiers, and officials. Power is something to be respected from a distance. Too much attention from it can be fatal. Gradually you absorb the idea that some lives matter less than others. Executions are public lessons. Punishments are spectacles meant to instruct. You are told to look, then told to remember. Mercy is rare. Order is maintained through fear, not fairness. No one tells you that this upbringing is shaping you. No one frames it as preparation. But your body learns before your mind does. You learn how to disappear into crowds, how to read moods, how to sense danger before it announces itself. You learn when to speak, when to wait, and when to move. Trust becomes selective. Friendship is possible but limited. Attachments are dangerous because loss is common. People vanish from your life with little explanation, and you're expected to accept it. Grief, like everything else, must be contained. By the time you are old enough to understand words like loyalty, secrecy, and obedience, they already feel natural. They do not sound like rules imposed from outside, but truths discovered through experience. This world rewards those who adapt quietly. You do not dream of glory, you dream of stability. You dream of lasting another day without drawing attention, without provoking the wrong interest. In a society built on hierarchy and force, remaining unseen feels like success. This is how your childhood shapes you. Not with speeches or lessons, but with repetition. Day after day, night after night. And without realizing it, you are already becoming someone who can live in shadows, someone who can accept violence as routine, someone who can survive in a world where killing is not shocking, only necessary. There comes a moment, quiet and unmarked, when you realize that childhood is no longer protecting you. No ceremony announces it, no clear event draws a line. Instead, responsibilities begin to settle on your shoulders, lightly at first, then with increasing weight, until you notice that the world expects more from you than simple obedience. You're trusted with tasks that require discretion. You're sent out after dark when the street's thin and sounds carry farther than they should. You're told where to go, sometimes only once, and you're expected to remember. Forgetting is not an option. You learn to fix directions in your mind, to count turns, to recognize landmarks even in low light. Messages pass through your hands. You're not meant to read them. but you feel their importance in the way they are sealed, in the urgency with which they are received. You begin to understand that information can be more dangerous than weapons. Words can ruin lives just as easily as blades. Adults start watching you differently. They notice how you move, how long you can wait without fidgeting, how quickly you return. Praise is rare, but its absence speaks volumes. Silence means approval. Correction is brief and sharp. You adapt. Your body is changing now, growing stronger, more resilient. You carry heavier loads. You walk longer distances. Fatigue becomes a background sensation, like hunger or cold. Complaints are pointless. Everyone is tired. Everyone is enduring something. You learn to control your face. Surprise must not show. Fear must remain hidden. Even pain should be contained. Reactions are information, and information can betray you. Slowly, expression becomes something you manage consciously, like a tool. The world beyond your home expands. You spend more time in streets, workshops, markets, and taverns. You observe how people interact when they believe they are unobserved. You notice patterns, who meets whom, who avoids whom, who arrives early, who lingers too long. You remember details without knowing why they matter. Authority is everywhere, but it is uneven. Guards patrol some areas heavily and neglect others entirely. Justice favors those with influence. You see men punished harshly for small crimes, while others walk free after greater offences. These contradictions sink into you quietly, shaping your understanding of how power truly works. You are introduced to rules that are never written down. Never use real names. Never repeat what you hear. Never be seen too often in the same place. Never assume safety. These rules are passed through tone and consequence, not explanation. There are moments of fear that linger long after they pass. A door opening unexpectedly. A hand grabbing your arm in the dark. A voice calling your description too accurately. Each time your heart races. Your breath tightens. And you learn how to regain control quickly. Panic is dangerous. Stillness is survival. Sleep grows lighter. You wake at the smallest disturbance. Your body learns to hover between rest and readiness. Dreams blur with reality. You imagine footsteps that are not there. You rehearse escapes in your mind without meaning to. Despite everything, there are moments of strange pride. You are trusted where others are not. You know things others do not. In a world that offers little security, usefulness feels like protection. Being needed feels safer than being invisible. Yet isolation deepens. You cannot speak freely with others your age. You carry secrets they would not understand and cannot be trusted with. Friendships remain shallow. You keep part of yourself hidden at all times, even when laughter appears genuine. Morality is not taught to you in simple terms. Right and wrong are blurred by necessity. You learn that survival often demands compromise. You learn that loyalty can justify cruelty, and that obedience can excuse harm. These ideas do not shock you. They are absorbed gradually, like everything else. You're not killing yet, not directly, but you are already participating in a system that depends on violence. Your actions support it, enable it, protect it. The distance between messenger and executioner feels smaller each day. Sometimes you wonder what life might have been like elsewhere, but such thoughts fade quickly. Wondering does not change reality. Adaptation does. By the time someone finally speaks to you openly about more serious work, it does not feel like a sudden descent. It feels like recognition, like confirmation of what you have already become. Your childhood has not been stolen in a single act. It has been eroded slowly, patiently, without witnesses, and when the next step comes, when blood is no longer indirect, you will not be unprepared. You've been trained by silence, fear, and necessity. This is how innocence ends. The moment does not arrive with drama. There is no formal invitation, no oath spoken under candlelight. Instead, it begins with a shift in tone, a subtle change in how certain people look at you, as if they are weighing something invisible. You sense it before it is ever said aloud. The world has been watching you, quietly, for some time. One evening you're asked to stay, others are dismissed, but you are not. The room feels smaller now, the air heavier. Words are chosen carefully. You are told that you have proven yourself reliable, that you listen, that you do not talk too much. None of this sounds extraordinary, yet you understand that these qualities are rare enough to matter. Sometimes the choice is not even framed as a choice. Circumstances tighten around you like a knot, a debt your family cannot repay, a protection offered in exchange for service, a threat that does not need to be spoken twice. Refusal feels theoretical, acceptance feels inevitable. In medieval society, violence is a tool like any other. Lords, merchants, guilds, even religious institutions all require discretion at times. Laws exist, but enforcement is inconsistent. When open force is inconvenient or too visible, quieter solutions are preferred. This is where people like you are needed. You're not chosen for strength alone. Many stronger than you exist. You're chosen for restraint, for patience, for your ability to carry instructions without embellishment, for your willingness to act without demanding justification. Those who hesitate too much are dangerous. Those who ask why are unreliable. Training does not begin immediately with weapons. First, your obedience is tested. You are given instructions that make little sense. You're watched to see if you follow them precisely. Deviations are noted. Corrections are cold. You learn that initiative is not always rewarded. Precision is. Secrecy becomes absolute. You are told less than you expect. Information is given in fragments. You understand that knowing too much increases risk for everyone involved. Ignorance is a form of protection, though it does not feel like one. Your old identity begins to loosen. Names matter less. What matters is function. You're not encouraged to think of yourself as special, only useful. Praise is rare and muted. Fear remains the primary motivator, but now it is sharpened with purpose. At times the process feels almost mundane. Days pass without incident. You wait, you observe, you run errands that appear meaningless. Yet beneath the surface you sense that these are preparations. Endurance is being measured. Consistency is being confirmed. There are moments when doubt surfaces. Quiet moments, often at night, when you wonder how far this path extends. But doubt has nowhere to go. There is no one to confide in, no alternative offered. The structure around you provides food, protection, and direction. Outside of it lies exposure. You are introduced to compartmentalization. This part of your life must never touch the others. You learn to shift between roles effortlessly. One moment you're unremarkable, forgettable. The next, you are focused, precise, alert. This flexibility becomes second nature. Morality is discussed only indirectly. You're told that the world is corrupt, that order must be maintained, that certain people are dangerous. These explanations are vague, but repetition gives them weight. Over time, you stop needing them. Obedience replaces justification. What surprises you most is how ordinary it all feels. There is no ceremony marking the loss of innocence. No single step that feels irreversible. Each action is small enough to justify on its own. It is only in hindsight that the transformation becomes clear. You're not asked if you are willing to kill. Not yet. Instead, you are shaped into someone who can. Someone who can wait without restlessness. Someone who can listen without reacting. Someone who can follow instructions even when they are incomplete. Whether you were chosen for your qualities or forced by circumstance no longer matters. The result is the same. Your life is narrowing into a specific function, one that operates quietly beneath the surface of medieval society. You have entered a world where people disappear without noise, where problems are solved without witnesses, and where survival depends on remaining useful. This is how it begins. Not with blood, but with commitment. And once given, that commitment is rarely released. At first, nothing visible changes. You still walk the same streets, breathe the same smoke-filled air, hear the same bells marking the passage of time. And yet, beneath the surface, your life has crossed an invisible threshold. You feel it in the way instructions are now delivered more quietly, in the way pauses linger longer than words, in the way expectations surround you without ever being spoken aloud. You're bound now, even if no chains touch your skin. Obligation settles slowly, like a weight added grain by grain. It is not dramatic, but it is constant. You are expected to be available, to be ready, to respond when summoned, regardless of weather, fatigue, or fear. Refusal is never mentioned because it is not considered realistic. You begin to understand how power truly works in this world. It does not rely solely on force, it relies on dependency. You receive protection, food, direction. In return, you offer silence and compliance. The exchange feels balanced at first. Later, it feels inescapable. Fear is carefully cultivated, not unleashed all at once. You hear stories of others who failed. Their names are spoken briefly, then avoided. You notice how absence replaces explanation. One day someone is there, the next they are not. You are left to imagine what happened, and imagination is more effective than detail. You are reminded subtly of what would happen if you spoke too much, moved too clumsily, or acted independently. These reminders arrive through tone, through looks, through the tightening of supervision. You learn quickly, you adjust. Your tasks become more specific, more sensitive. You're asked to watch particular people, to follow them without being seen, to note habits, routines, weaknesses. You learn how predictable most lives are, how repetition creates vulnerability. This is when discomfort begins to deepen. Observation feels intrusive. You're no longer a passive part of violence, you're preparing it. You tell yourself that you're still distant from the final act, that others will decide what to do with the information, but distance shrinks with every detail you provide. Sleep grows heavier with thoughts you cannot share. You replay movements in your mind, you rehearse routes and exits. Your body remains tense even at rest. Readiness becomes permanent. At times, a strange numbness develops. Emotions dull themselves, perhaps as protection. Fear does not vanish, but it becomes controlled, compressed. You learn to function alongside it. You begin to measure risk instead of reacting to it. There's also a growing sense of inevitability. You realize that the structure around you has no interest in letting you leave. Knowledge is a liability. Experience is too valuable to discard carelessly. Even if you wanted to disappear, you would not know how. You may be tested directly, not with killing, but with proximity. You're brought near violence and expected not to flinch. You witness beatings, interrogations, executions. You're observed closely during these moments. Your reactions are evaluated. Discomfort is acceptable. Hesitation is not. You learn that hesitation costs lives, sometimes your own. At some point, someone speaks plainly to you, though never emotionally. They explain that certain problems cannot be solved openly. That order must be maintained. That mercy is not always compatible with stability. The language is abstract, almost philosophical. It allows cruelty to sound reasonable. You're not asked for agreement, only for understanding. The moment you realize you've passed the point of no return is quiet. It might come when you notice that you no longer imagine alternatives, or when the thought of exposure feels more terrifying than the thought of violence, or when you realize that your skills now define your value. You're no longer merely associated with this world, you are integrated into it. Your old life fades not because it is forbidden, but because it is irrelevant. You move differently now, you watch differently. You think in terms of outcomes and consequences. People become variables. Trust becomes rare. And still, outwardly, you remain unremarkable. That is your greatest asset. You blend, you pass, you exist without drawing attention. Medieval society is full of shadows, and you learn how to occupy them completely. There is no single moment when you agree to kill. Instead, you accept everything that makes killing possible. By the time the question is finally asked, directly or indirectly, your answer is already assumed. Not because you are eager, but because you are bound by obligation, fear, and familiarity. This is how you become an assassin. Not through desire, but through narrowing choices. Not through ideology, but through survival. And once you understand this, truly understand it, there is a strange calm that follows, a resignation, a readiness. The world has decided what you are for, and soon it will ask you to prove it. Nothing about the training feels heroic. It does not begin with confidence or certainty, but with confusion, exhaustion, and the dull realization that your body no longer belongs entirely to you. From now on it will be tested, corrected, and reshaped according to needs that are not your own. Days start early, often before the light has fully crept into the streets. You rise while the city still sleeps, when the air is cold and heavy with moisture. Your muscles ache from the day before, but rest is never considered a valid excuse. Fatigue is part of the process. It strips away hesitation and reveals instinct. At first there is very little talk of killing. Instead, you are taught stillness. You stand for long periods without moving, learning how to distribute your weight so your legs do not tremble. You kneel on hard ground until discomfort fades into numbness. You are corrected constantly. A shoulder too tense, a breath too loud, a shift too sudden. Each mistake is addressed immediately. Breathing becomes something you relearn from the beginning. Slow, silent breath through the nose. Controlled exhales. You practice regulating your heartbeat, calming your body even when stress is introduced deliberately. Sudden noises, unexpected touches, shouted commands. You're expected to remain composed. Movement follows. You learn how to walk without sound, placing each foot carefully, rolling it gently onto stone or earth. You practice crossing rooms without disturbing dust or loose straw. You learn how fabric brushes against skin, how leather creaks if handled poorly. Every sound is an enemy. Strength training is practical and unglamorous. You carry heavy loads repeatedly. You climb walls and ropes until your hands burn and split. You crawl through narrow spaces, forcing your body to adapt to confinement. Endurance matters more than size. A tired assassin is a dead assassin. Weapons appear only after your body has been humbled enough to respect them. Small blades at first, easy to conceal, unforgiving of mistakes. You're taught how to hold them properly, how to keep your grip relaxed yet firm. You practice drawing them smoothly, returning them without looking, over and over again until the motion no longer requires thought. You're shown where the human body fails, not through grand explanations, but through quiet demonstration. You learn where pressure disrupts breath, where blood flows fastest, where pain overwhelms function. This knowledge is delivered without emotion. It is anatomical, not moral. The first time you're asked to strike something resembling a human form, your hesitation is expected. A pause, a tightening of the chest, a flicker of doubt. You're not punished for it immediately. You are simply told to repeat the motion, again, and again, and again. Repetition dulls resistance. Your instructors do not shout unless necessary. Calm correction is more effective. When pain is used, it is precise, a reminder, not a release of anger. Pain teaches memory. Memory ensures survival. Mental conditioning is constant. You're exposed to blood, injuries, suffering, not all at once, but gradually, until these sites lose their ability to shock. You're watched carefully during these moments. Averted eyes are noted. Shallow breathing is corrected. You learn to remain present, even when instinct tells you to turn away. Disguise is introduced not as costume, but as behavior. You practice becoming forgettable. You learn how to adjust your posture, your pace, your gaze. You learn how to look tired, harmless, unimportant. Attention is dangerous. Blending in is protection. Waiting becomes its own form of training. You're made to wait for hours without instruction, without movement, without stimulation. You learn how boredom weakens discipline. You learn how impatience creates mistakes. Slowly, you learn to exist comfortably in stillness. Your body begins to change. Muscles harden. Movements become efficient. You notice that your reactions are faster, quieter. Sudden disturbances no longer produce panic, only calculation. You start assessing exits instinctively, without conscious effort. Sleep, when it comes, is deep but brief. Dreams are fragmented, often filled with repetition, movements, strikes, falls. Your mind is absorbing patterns even at rest. You wake already alert. There is no encouragement to enjoy any of this. Pleasure is irrelevant. Pride is discouraged. The goal is reliability. You're being shaped into someone who functions under pressure, who performs tasks without emotional interference. Gradually, fear changes its form. It does not disappear, but it becomes something you carry rather than something that carries you. You learn to acknowledge it without obeying it. This, more than strength, is what allows killing without hesitation. By the end of this stage, you understand something unsettling. Your body now knows how to do things your conscience has not fully accepted. Your hands move faster than your thoughts. Your reactions precede reflection. You have not yet killed. But the distance between you and that act has narrowed considerably, and you sense with a quiet certainty that when the moment comes, your body will not refuse. At some point, the training stops feeling physical and starts feeling internal. Your muscles may ache less, your movements may grow more precise, but something else is now being worked on more intensely: your mind. This phase is quieter, more subtle, and far more difficult to resist. You're no longer pushed constantly. Instead, you're observed. Silence replaces instruction. You're left alone with your thoughts for long stretches of time, and you begin to understand that distraction was never the greatest challenge. Reflection is. You're encouraged to detach, not openly, not through lectures, but through structure. You are kept busy, then abruptly idle. You're surrounded by people, then isolated completely. These shifts are deliberate. They teach you to function without emotional anchors. Fear is addressed differently now. Earlier it was confronted through repetition and exhaustion. Now it is examined, broken down, stripped of its power. You're made to relive moments of anxiety mentally, guided to observe them without reacting. Fear becomes a sensation rather than a command. You're reminded constantly that hesitation is the true enemy. Not cruelty, not violence. Hesitation leads to noise, mistakes, witnesses. In this world, hesitation kills more surely than blades. To reinforce this, scenarios are presented. Hypothetical at first. You're asked what you would do if a target moved unexpectedly, if a child appeared in the wrong place, if a plan collapsed mid-action. There are no correct answers, only consequences. You learn to think in outcomes rather than ideals. Gradually, emotional responses are reframed as weaknesses. Compassion is not forbidden, but it is considered dangerous when it interferes with precision. You're taught to compartmentalize feelings, to store them away until they are no longer disruptive. This skill becomes essential. You learn to silence your internal voice, the part of you that questions, that hesitates, that imagines alternatives. Through repetition, through fatigue, through constant correction, that voice grows quieter. Not gone, but distant. Your instructors speak more about responsibility now, about the importance of finishing what you start, about the dangers of loose ends. Failure is no longer measured by mistakes but by consequences. A job unfinished is worse than a job done imperfectly. Isolation deepens this process. You are discouraged from forming close bonds. Attachments complicate judgment. Loss creates instability. You learn to keep relationships shallow, functional. Loneliness becomes familiar, even comforting. You're shown what happens when control is lost, not through dramatization, but through examples. Stories of operations gone wrong, of people who panicked, of mistakes that led to exposure, retaliation, torture. These stories are not embellished. Their simplicity makes them effective. Gradually your sense of self shifts. You stop defining yourself by personal traits or desires. Instead, you think in terms of capability, what you can do, what you can endure, what you can survive. Identity becomes utilitarian. There are moments when your old self surfaces, a memory, a scent, a sound that reminds you of a simpler time. These moments are brief and often painful. You learn not to dwell on them. Nostalgia weakens focus. Your perception of others changes as well. People become patterns of behavior rather than emotional beings. You notice habits, routines, vulnerabilities. This detachment is not cruelty. It is efficiency. Empathy, when uncontrolled, interferes with assessment. Sleep becomes strange. Dreams lose narrative and become fragmented sensations. Movement, pressure, silence. You wake often with no clear reason, alert and ready. Rest feels lighter now, less complete. You're encouraged to accept moral ambiguity without resolution. There are no final answers, only actions and consequences. This worldview simplifies decision-making. It also narrows it. Eventually you are tested in situations that simulate the final act closely enough to feel real. The pressure is intense. Timing matters. Observation matters. You're expected to act without freezing, without questioning. Afterwards you're evaluated quietly. No praise, no condemnation, only adjustment. You realize slowly that you're no longer being taught how to kill. You're being taught how not to feel while doing it. This realization is unsettling but fleeting. There is little time for reflection. The process continues relentless and methodical. By the end of this phase, something essential has dulled. The sharp edge of revulsion, the instinctive recoil. In their place is a controlled calm, a readiness that feels unnatural yet dependable. You understand now why so few people can live this life for long. It is not the danger that breaks them. It is the erosion of inner resistance, the slow flattening of emotional response. You're still human, but you're becoming something narrower, someone capable of acting decisively in moments others cannot endure. And as this transformation settles, you sense that the next step will no longer be training. It will be application. At first it feels like a relief. Letting go of your name, or at least loosening your grip on it, seems almost comforting after everything you have endured. A name ties you to expectations, to history, to people who might ask questions. In the world you are entering now, anonymity feels like protection. You're taught early that names are dangerous. They can be remembered, repeated, written down. They can travel farther than bodies ever will. So you begin to exist under many labels, none of them truly yours. Sometimes you're known only by a description, sometimes by a role. Often you are not named at all. You learn to answer to whatever is convenient in the moment. A different name in each town, a different accent when necessary. You practice introducing yourself casually, as if the identity you present has always belonged to you. Over time, the line between truth and fabrication blurs, not because you are confused, but because it no longer matters. False identities are built from observation. You learn which trades are common enough to go unquestioned, which stories sound plausible in certain regions, which details invite curiosity and which discourage it. You memorize small, believable histories, a dead spouse, a failed harvest, a journey interrupted by misfortune. Suffering makes stories credible. You begin to travel more, never staying long enough to be remembered clearly. Inns, stables, markets, ports, all become temporary stages where you perform versions of yourself. You learn how to appear tired but harmless, reserved but polite. You avoid strong impressions. Being forgettable becomes a skill. Secrecy extends beyond names. You're taught never to reveal patterns. Routes change. Habits are broken deliberately. Even small comforts are avoided if they risk repetition. Consistency is a liability. You learn to live with constant variation, even when it unsettles you. Isolation deepens as a result. Conversations remain shallow. Relationships remain functional. You may share meals, laughter, even moments of intimacy, but always with restraint. You never fully relax. Part of you is always watching, measuring, preparing to disappear. Trust becomes rare and conditional. You understand that everyone has incentives, fears, loyalties you cannot see. You assume that betrayal is always possible, not out of paranoia, but realism. Medieval life is harsh for many. Survival often demands compromise. You're encouraged to keep no written records. Memory is safer than parchment. What must be remembered is rehearsed silently, then allowed to fade when no longer useful. Forgetting becomes intentional. You let details slip away to protect yourself. This constant reinvention takes a toll. Without a stable identity, your sense of self begins to thin. You are no longer anchored by reputation or continuity. You exist moment to moment, role to role. There is freedom in this, but also emptiness. Loneliness becomes constant, though not always painful. It is simply there, like background noise. You learn to accept it. In fact, too much connection begins to feel uncomfortable, even threatening. Attachment invites risk. You notice that others rarely look closely at you. Most people are consumed by their own struggles. This anonymity is useful, but it also reinforces your invisibility. You pass through lives without leaving marks and without receiving any in return. At times, you catch yourself forgetting which identity you're currently wearing. The mistake is small, a hesitation, a mismatched detail, but it sends a ripple of unease through you. You correct it quickly. Mistakes must remain internal. Your instructors emphasize that isolation is not punishment, it is armor. The fewer people who know you, the fewer can expose you. The fewer connections you have, the fewer weaknesses can be exploited. Still, there are moments when the weight of this life presses heavily. In quiet rooms late at night, you feel the absence of recognition. No one truly knows you. No one would mourn you as yourself. If you vanished, you would dissolve into rumor at best. You learn not to dwell on this. Reflection leads nowhere useful. Function matters more than fulfillment. Gradually you internalize the idea that you are not meant to be seen. You are a presence without a past, an action without a trace. This understanding shapes your movements, your speech, your posture. You occupy space lightly, as if ready to erase yourself at any moment. Living without a name becomes normal. Living without witnesses becomes necessary. And as this way of existing settles into you, you realize that secrecy is no longer something you practice. It is something you are. Over time, something subtle begins to unravel inside you. It is not dramatic, not sudden, and certainly not visible from the outside. It unfolds quietly in the long pauses between actions, in the moments when no role is required and no task demands your attention. When nothing is asked of you, you begin to notice what is missing. Living without a name means living without continuity. Each identity you wear exists only briefly, then dissolves. You move from place to place carrying fragments of invented lives that must never overlap. The effort required to maintain these separations is constant. Even your memories must be managed carefully. You begin to censor yourself internally. Certain thoughts are pushed aside because they belong to another version of you. Certain emotions are restrained because they might soften your vigilance. Over time, this self-monitoring becomes automatic. You no longer notice how much energy it consumes. There is no audience for your true self because revealing it would be dangerous. Without witnesses, experiences lose their weight. Joy feels thinner. Pain feels oddly distant. Even fear, once sharp, becomes muted by familiarity. Emotional extremes flatten into something more manageable but also more empty. You start to notice how little you are remembered. Faces blur quickly once you leave a place. People recall your presence vaguely, if at all. This is by design. Yet it carries an unexpected sting. To be forgettable is useful. To be forgettable always is something else entirely. Loneliness takes on a particular quality. It is not the absence of people, you're often surrounded by them, but the absence of recognition. No one sees you as a complete person. They see only the role you perform, the function you serve. When the role ends, so does their interest. You learn to keep conversation shallow. Opinions are softened. Stories are generic. You avoid details that might invite curiosity. You laugh when appropriate, nod when expected, but rarely engage deeply. Depth creates memory. Memory creates risk. At night, when there is no one to observe you, thoughts drift more freely. You replay moments from earlier lives, earlier names, the sound of a voice that once mattered, a place where you stayed longer than planned. These memories surface uninvited, then fade, leaving a quiet ache behind. You begin to realize that erasing yourself repeatedly has consequences. Without a stable identity, your sense of purpose becomes entirely external. You exist to fulfill tasks, to complete assignments, to move unseen. When there is nothing to do, you feel strangely hollow. Trusting others becomes increasingly difficult. Even when kindness is genuine, you cannot accept it fully. You assume conditions, expectations, hidden costs. Suspicion feels safer than hope. Over time, this mindset hardens. You also notice a change in how you view morality. Actions are no longer judged by right or wrong, but by effectiveness and consequence. This shift simplifies decisions, but it also distances you from ordinary human responses. You begin to feel different, separate. There are moments when you catch a reflection unexpectedly. In water, in polished metal, in glass, you study your face as if it belongs to someone else. Which version is this? Which name does this face wear today? The question has no satisfying answer. Fatigue becomes emotional as much as physical. Maintaining constant vigilance, constant adaptation, constant concealment wears you down. Yet rest is elusive. Relaxation feels unsafe. Even in solitude, you remain alert, listening, waiting. You realize that isolation has become self-reinforcing. The longer you live this way, the harder it becomes to imagine living differently. Ordinary life now feels exposed, loud, dangerously visible. The idea of being known, truly known, feels almost frightening. Occasionally you envy those who live openly, even if their lives are harder in other ways. At least they are anchored. At least they are seen. But envy is fleeting. You remind yourself that visibility comes with vulnerability. Your instructors were correct about one thing. Isolation is armor, but armor is heavy and it must be worn constantly. You cannot remove it without risking everything. Gradually you stop asking who you are beneath the roles. The question feels impractical. Instead, you focus on who you need to be in each moment. This functional identity is easier to maintain, even if it leaves little room for reflection. You become accustomed to the idea that your life will leave no trace, no legacy, no stories told accurately. At best, rumours. At worst, nothing at all. This acceptance is not peaceful, but it is stable. Living without a name changes you permanently. It teaches you to exist without attachment. It teaches you to disappear without regret. And as this way of life settles deeper into your bones, you understand that secrecy is no longer a technique you employ. It is the shape of your existence. At first, you're surprised by how ordinary the tools look. There is no grandeur to them. No sense of ceremony. They are small, practical objects, easily overlooked, often mistaken for something harmless. This is intentional. In your world, the most effective instruments of death are those that draw no attention to themselves. You learn quickly that a weapon is not defined by how it looks, but by how it is used. Size, weight, balance. These matter far more than decoration. A blade that shines is a liability. A weapon that announces itself invites resistance. What you're given instead is modest, efficient, and unforgiving. Daggers become your constant companions, short enough to conceal beneath clothing, light enough to carry without fatigue, sharp enough to do their work quickly. You learn how different designs behave. Narrow blades for precision, broader ones for reliability. You learn how steel reacts to bone, to fabric, to flesh. This knowledge is acquired through repetition, not explanation. You practice concealment endlessly. Sleeves, belts, boots, folds of cloth. Every garment becomes potential cover. You learn how to move without revealing the weight you carry, how to sit without discomfort, how to draw without hesitation. A weapon that cannot be accessed instantly is useless. Maintenance becomes ritual. Blades are cleaned carefully, dried thoroughly, oiled lightly. Rust is the enemy. Neglect is unforgivable. You learn to check edges by touch rather than sight, to feel imperfections with your fingertips. This quiet attention builds familiarity. The weapon becomes an extension of your hand. Poison is introduced later, and with greater caution. It is treated with respect bordering on fear. You learn that poison is unpredictable, dependent on dosage, purity, and the body it enters. It requires patience. It removes distance between cause and consequence. You are taught never to rely on it unless circumstances demand it. Handling poisons teaches restraint. You measure carefully, mix precisely, store securely. A single mistake can kill the wrong person, including yourself. You learn which substances act quickly and which work slowly, mimicking illness. You learn how taste, smell, and colour betray carelessness. Disguises are not theatrical. There are no masks of legend, no dramatic cloaks. Instead, disguises built from fabric choices, posture, grooming, a change in haircut, dirt beneath the nails, a limp that disappears when unobserved. You learn that the smallest details are the most convincing. You practice becoming invisible by appearing ordinary, a labourer, a traveller, a servant, someone unremarkable enough to pass through spaces without being questioned. You study how people of different trades move, speak, and carry themselves. Imitation becomes second nature. Improvised weapons are emphasized heavily. You are taught that anything can kill if used correctly. A stone, a rope, a shard of pottery, even bare hands, applied with knowledge and timing. This understanding is crucial. Weapons can be lost. Opportunities cannot. You learn to assess environments instinctively. Entering a room, you notice weight, edges, angles. What can be grabbed? What can be thrown? What can block an exit? Your eyes scan constantly, cataloguing possibilities without conscious effort. There is an emphasis on silence. Noise attracts attention. A perfect strike is one that ends resistance immediately. You are trained to minimize struggle, to apply force efficiently. Brutality is discouraged not for moral reasons but practical ones. The quicker the act, the safer the escape. You are also taught restraint. Killing is not always required. Sometimes intimidation suffices. Sometimes observation is enough. A tool unused is still a tool. Discretion governs everything. As your familiarity grows, the tools lose their novelty. They become ordinary, almost comforting in their reliability. This realization unsettles you briefly. You are handling instruments designed solely to end life, yet they now feel routine. You're reminded often that tools do not make an assassin. Judgment does. Timing does. Discipline does. A blade in untrained hands is just metal. In yours, it is potential. There are rules you must never break. Never carry more than necessary. Never grow attached to a specific weapon. Never hesitate to abandon it if required. Tools are expendable. You're not, at least not yet. Gradually you stop thinking of these objects as separate from your work. They're part of the process, like breath or movement. You know their presence without checking. You feel their absence immediately. This familiarity brings confidence, but also danger. Overconfidence invites mistakes. You are warned repeatedly. Respect the tools. Respect their consequences. By the end of this phase, you understand that killing is not about force alone. It is about preparation, subtlety, and control. The tools simply make these qualities effective. And as you move through the world, carrying death in forms no one notices, You realize that the most dangerous weapon you possess is not the blade at your side. It is the calm precision with which you are now able to use it. Eventually, the tools stop feeling like objects you carry and start feeling like secrets you embody. They are no longer separate from you. They move when you move, wait when you wait, remain silent when silence is required. You do not think about them constantly, but you are always aware of their presence, like an extra sense resting just beneath your skin. Carrying death without being seen is not a matter of hiding weapons alone. It is a way of existing. Your posture changes subtly so nothing presses or shifts. Your movements grow economical, avoiding sudden gestures that might reveal weight or shape beneath clothing. You learn to sit, kneel, rise and walk in ways that keep everything concealed and controlled. Clothing becomes part of your arsenal. Fabrics are chosen carefully. Too stiff, and they betray what lies beneath. Too loose, and they snag or shift. You favour layers that fall naturally, colours that do not draw the eye, garments that mark you as unimportant. Fashion has no place here. Practical anonymity does. You practice moving through crowded spaces with weapons hidden against your body. Markets, taverns, festivals, places filled with noise and distraction. You learn how bodies press together, how contact can be used to mask movement, how confusion can be both risk and cover. You learn to navigate without urgency, because haste attracts notice. Every entrance into a building is deliberate. You assess thresholds, doorways, staircases. You notice where light falls and where it does not. You choose where to stand, where to lean, where to pause. The goal is always the same, to look like you belong, even when you're ready to disappear. You learn how to carry poisons without fear revealing itself. Small vials hidden in ordinary containers, powders disguised among spices or medicines, liquids absorbed into cloth. Each method is tested, refined, practiced, until it becomes routine. Fear of your own tools is dangerous. Familiarity reduces mistakes. At the same time, you are taught never to grow careless. Each time you prepare, you check and recheck. You assume nothing. Complacency is treated as a greater threat than ignorance. Many have survived ignorance. Few survive carelessness. You learn how to enter and leave spaces without leaving traces, how to touch surfaces lightly, how to wipe away marks without making them obvious, how to leave disorder that looks accidental rather than deliberate. The absence of evidence is ideal, confusion is acceptable, certainty is fatal, your senses sharpen. You notice when someone looks at you too long. You hear shifts in tone behind you. You feel changes in the air when attention turns your way. This awareness is exhausting, but it keeps you alive. You also learn restraint in possession. You never carry everything at once. Tools are distributed, cached, hidden in places only you know. If you are searched, discovered, or forced to flee, you must be able to abandon everything without hesitation. Attachment to objects leads to hesitation. Hesitation leads to death. There are drills for this. Sudden commands, unexpected interruptions. You are forced to discard tools instantly without regret. The lesson is clear. Survival depends on flexibility, not preparation alone. As time passes, you become skilled at reading others. You recognize those who carry weapons themselves, even when they think they are concealed. A slight stiffness, a guarded movement, a habitual check. You note them automatically, adjusting your behavior accordingly. There is an odd intimacy to this awareness. You and they share a secret language of posture and restraint. Even if you never exchange words, it reminds you that violence is never far away, only waiting for permission. Despite all precautions, accidents happen. A blade slips, a vial cracks, a garment tears. These moments are terrifying, not because of immediate danger, but because of exposure. You learn how to respond calmly, how to improvise explanations, how to retreat without drawing attention. Your heart races during these moments, but your face remains composed. Panic must never show. You breathe slowly, you move deliberately, you trust your training. Over time, the emotional weight of carrying death constantly begins to surface, not as guilt exactly, but as pressure. You're always prepared to end a life, always aware that a small motion could change everything. This readiness shapes how you see the world. You begin to perceive fragility everywhere, throats unguarded, backs turned, trust given freely. Ordinary life looks vulnerable from your perspective. This awareness is isolating. It separates you from those who live without such calculations, yet you cannot turn it off. Awareness is survival. Forgetting is dangerous. At times you wonder what it would be like to move without this burden, to walk without weight, without secrets pressed against your skin. The thought feels almost unimaginable now. Your body feels incomplete without its hidden tools. By now, carrying death without being seen has become second nature. You do not think of it as exceptional. It is simply how you exist, calm, controlled, prepared. You understand fully that your greatest protection is not concealment alone, but normalcy. You're not feared because you are not noticed. You pass through lives like a shadow at noon, present but unexamined. And as you move through this medieval world, silent and armed, you realize that the tools you carry have shaped you just as much as you have shaped them. They have taught you patience. They have taught you restraint. They have taught you how thin the line is between ordinary life and sudden death. Soon, you will be asked to cross that line deliberately. And when that moment comes, nothing you carry will betray you. Not a sound, not a glance, not even a name. Long before anything happens, there is waiting. Not the simple waiting of boredom, but a deeper, heavier kind that settles into your muscles and thoughts alike. It is the waiting that stretches time, that sharpens every sound, that makes minutes feel like hours, and hours feel endless. In the life you now live, this waiting is not a pause between actions. It is the action itself. You learn quickly that most of your work consists of doing nothing perfectly, remaining still, remaining unnoticed, remaining ready. This kind of patience is not natural. It must be cultivated slowly, painfully, until it becomes instinct. You wait in places that were never meant for comfort. Cold rooftops where stone presses through thin layers of cloth. Dark corners of stables thick with the smell of animals and rot. Narrow alleys where dampness creeps into your bones. You learn to endure discomfort without shifting, without betraying your presence. Your body must remain quiet even when it protests. Muscles cramp, joints ache, circulation slows. You learn small techniques to relieve pressure without visible movement, a subtle shift of weight, a controlled breath. Anything more would be dangerous. Fear accompanies the waiting, but it changes shape. It is no longer sharp panic, it becomes a constant low pressure, like a hand resting on your chest. You are aware of it at all times, but you do not allow it to control you. Fear sharpens your attention. It reminds you what is at stake. Your senses stretch outward. You hear footsteps long before they arrive. You recognize individual voices through walls. You learn to distinguish between meaningful sounds and harmless noise, a rat in the straw, a drunk stumbling home, a guard adjusting his armor. Each sound is evaluated, categorized, remembered. Time loses its normal rhythm. Bells mark hours, but they feel abstract. Your focus narrows to the immediate present, the next breath, the next movement nearby, the next opportunity or threat. The future exists only as preparation. You're often waiting for someone who does not know they are being watched. You learn their habits slowly. When they leave, when they return, who accompanies them, where they linger. Patterns emerge, but you never trust them fully. Humans are predictable until they are not. Patience becomes an ethical issue of its own. Acting too soon risks failure. Acting too late risks exposure. You balance constantly on this edge, measuring probability and consequence. There is no perfect moment. There is only the least dangerous one. During long waits, thoughts drift despite your efforts. Memories surface uninvited. Faces from earlier lives. Names you once answered to. You push them away gently but firmly. Distraction is dangerous. You return your attention to the present, to breath and sound. Your body grows used to hunger during these hours. You learn to eat little beforehand, to avoid digestion noises, to prevent fatigue. Water is rationed carefully. Every bodily need becomes a potential liability. You learn to manage them with discipline. There are moments when nothing happens at all. Hours pass in stillness. No footsteps, no voices, no movement. These are the hardest moments. The mind seeks stimulation. It invents threats. You must resist this urge. Imagined danger can provoke real mistakes. You practice mental exercises to stay calm. Counting breaths. Observing tiny details in your surroundings. Letting time pass without resistance. You become intimate with stillness, even when it feels unbearable. Occasionally, danger comes close without revealing itself fully. Someone pauses nearby. A guard leans against a wall close enough for you to smell leather and sweat. A torchlight sweeps past your hiding place. Your heart races, but your body remains motionless. These moments test everything you have learned. Afterward, there is no relief. The waiting continues. Adrenaline fades slowly, leaving exhaustion behind. You remain alert despite it. Fatigue is ignored. Survival demands it. You realize that this waiting is where many fail, not because they lack skill, but because they cannot endure the emptiness. They move too soon. They adjust when they should not. They reveal themselves through impatience. Waiting teaches humility. You're reminded how small you are, how dependent on circumstance. Control is limited. Adaptation is everything. Over time, the waiting reshapes your inner life. You become comfortable with silence. You learn to coexist with fear without seeking to eliminate it. You accept uncertainty as permanent. There is no audience for this part of your work. No acknowledgement, no recognition. If done well, it leaves no trace at all. And yet, it is the foundation upon which everything else rests. You understand now that killing is not defined by the strike itself, but by everything that leads up to it. The preparation, the observation, the restraint. And so you wait, breathing slowly, listening carefully, ready to act, but not yet. In this suspended state, balance between motion and stillness, you feel the full weight of what your life has become. A life measured not in deeds, but in hours spent unseen. And still the waiting continues. There's a point when waiting changes its nature. Nothing visible announces it, yet you feel it immediately. Like a shift in pressure before a storm. The air seems denser, sounds sharpen. Your body, which has been still for so long, grows suddenly alert, as if awakened from a light sleep. This is the moment before action, the fragile space where everything balances. You do not rush. Rushing would betray you now. Instead, you let the final details settle into place. You confirm what you already know, where the exits are, how long it would take to reach them, what lies between you and the target. These calculations unfold quietly, without urgency, refined by countless hours of preparation. Your breathing slows further. You become aware of each inhale, each exhale, careful not to let either deepen too much. Breath must remain silent. Your heartbeat feels loud inside your chest, but you trust that it cannot be heard. You have learned to coexist with it. This moment is not filled with excitement. It is filled with restraint. Every instinct that urges you to move must be held back until the exact instant arrives. Acting too early would unravel everything. Acting too late might close the opportunity entirely. You watch closely now, not just movements, but intentions. A hesitation, a glance over a shoulder, a pause that suggests uncertainty. You have learned to read these signs, to recognize when someone is about to change course, to leave, to call out. Timing is everything. Fear surfaces again here, but in a quieter form. It is no longer a threat, it is information. It reminds you of the stakes, exposure, capture, torture, death. These possibilities exist simultaneously, and you acknowledge them without dwelling. Fear sharpens focus when it is controlled. Your body feels strangely light despite the tension. Muscles that were stiff during waiting now feel ready, coiled. Movements are rehearsed mentally one last time. The path forward, the motion of the hand, the sequence of actions. You do not improvise unless forced. Improvisation is risk. There is often a moment of unexpected clarity. The world seems to narrow, details falling away until only what matters remains. Distractions lose their power. You feel present in a way that ordinary life rarely allows. Thoughts of morality do not surface now. They have no place here. Those questions were settled long ago or buried beneath necessity. What remains is function, precision, completion. You may notice small ordinary details that feel out of place. A candle flickering, the sound of distant laughter, the smell of food from a nearby hearth. These reminders of everyday life feel almost surreal, existing alongside the violence you are preparing to commit. The contrast is unsettling but fleeting. You check your surroundings one final time. You confirm that no one else is watching, that shadows remain undisturbed, that routes remain clear. This final scan is instinctive, practiced, essential. Your mind becomes quiet, not empty, but focused. There is no room for doubt. Doubt belongs to earlier stages. Now there is only execution. You understand that once you move, there is no reversal. The world will change in ways that cannot be undone. You will cross a line that cannot be stepped back over. Even if the act itself is brief, its consequences will ripple outward. Yet you do not hesitate. Hesitation is what you were trained to eliminate. It is what gets people killed unnecessarily, including you. You accept that whatever follows must be faced, just as you have faced everything before. Your senses reach their peak, sounds slow down, movements seem clearer. You feel grounded, aware of your weight, your balance, your position in space. This heightened awareness is temporary, but it is reliable. The final seconds stretch. You count nothing. You wait for the exact alignment of circumstances. When it comes, you recognize it immediately. Not because it feels perfect, but because it feels inevitable. This is the moment when waiting ends. You act not with anger, not with excitement, but with calm efficiency. Everything you have endured, the training, the isolation, the patience, converges here. The movement is deliberate, controlled, silent. There is no room for error now, and even as you commit to motion, part of you remains already focused on what comes next. Escape, distance, disappearance. The act itself is only one part of a larger sequence. You know that once it is done, there will be no pause for reflection, no time to process. Survival demands immediate attention. Still, for this brief instant balance between stillness and action, you feel the full weight of your life pressing against the present. Every choice, every compromise, every eroded boundary has led here. This is what all the waiting was for. And as you move, finally, deliberately, you understand something with absolute clarity. The hardest part was never the act itself. It was enduring everything that led up to it. The act itself is nothing like what imagination prepares you for. It does not arrive with thunder or clarity, but with a strange narrowing of the world, as if everything outside the immediate moment has quietly stepped back. When you move, it feels both deliberate and automatic, as though your body has been waiting for permission it no longer needs. You're suddenly very close, closer than is comfortable, close enough to feel warmth, breath, the subtle movement of another body unaware of what is about to happen. This proximity is unsettling in a way distance never is. Killing from afar allows illusion. Killing up close allows none. Time behaves oddly. The moment stretches yet unfolds quickly. You notice details you did not expect to notice. The texture of fabric beneath your fingers, the faint scent of sweat or oil, the small, ordinary sounds of life continuing around you. These details press themselves into memory. Your training takes over. Your hands move where they must. There is no room for improvisation now. Precision matters. Speed matters. You do not think in terms of violence or cruelty. You think in terms of completion. There is resistance. Not always dramatic, but real. A sudden tensing, a reflexive movement. The human body is stubborn, even when surprised. You apply force efficiently, exactly as you were taught. Struggle must be brief. Noise must be minimized. The goal is silence. The physical sensation is disturbing in its immediacy. The body you are acting upon is solid, warm, alive. There is weight, texture, pressure. This is not an abstract enemy. This is a person whose life is ending because you are here. Your mind does something strange to cope. It narrows further, focusing only on mechanics, grip, angle, pressure, breathing. You do not allow yourself to consider who this person is beyond the immediate task. Identity complicates action. Distance, even psychological distance, is necessary. There may be a sound, a sharp intake of breath, a gurgle, a sudden silence. These sounds stay with you longer than you expect. They are intimate, unfiltered, impossible to romanticize. The moment of death itself is not dramatic. It is often subtle, marked by a release of tension, a slackening. The body yields in a way that is unmistakable. You recognize it instantly, even if you have never seen it before. Life leaves quietly. You do not linger. Lingering is dangerous. Your hands move away. You step back. You scan your surroundings automatically. Training reasserts itself immediately. There is no time to stand still, no time to process. Survival demands action. And yet something has changed. Even as you move, even as you prepare to disappear, you feel it. A shift inside you, subtle but irreversible. You have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Your body reacts before your mind does. Adrenaline surges. Your heart races. Your senses sharpen further. You feel light, almost unreal. This reaction is not pleasure. It is release. Tension finding an outlet after hours, days, sometimes weeks of waiting. Thoughts come later, much later. For now, there is only procedure. Clean what must be cleaned, adjust what must be adjusted, leave what must be left behind. You're careful not to overcorrect. Overcorrection draws attention. As you move away, blending back into the world, the contrast is jarring. Ordinary life continues. People laugh, animals move, bells ring. The world does not pause to acknowledge what has just occurred. This indifference is unsettling. At some point, distance is achieved. Physical distance first, then, slowly, emotional distance. You breathe more freely. Your muscles begin to relax. Only then do fragments of awareness return. Images surface unexpectedly. A look in the eyes, a hand reaching out reflexively, the sound of breath leaving a body. These fragments intrude without warning. You do not dwell on them. You cannot afford to. You may feel nothing at all, or you may feel a strange mixture of sensations that do not resolve into clear emotion. Relief, numbness, discomfort. None of these fit neatly into words. Guilt, if it comes later. Often, much later. In the moment itself, guilt would be dangerous. It would slow you down. It would compromise escape. Your mind knows this, and so it postpones reckoning. You realize that killing up close removes illusions permanently. You cannot pretend it was distant or impersonal. You were there. Your hands did this. This knowledge settles somewhere deep inside you. At the same time, you understand why proximity is favored. It is efficient, reliable, quiet. It leaves fewer variables. This understanding does not comfort you. It simply explains necessity. Later, when you are alone, the memory may replay in fragments, not as a coherent scene, but as sensations, pressure, sound, stillness. These memories resist logic. They return without invitation. You learn, slowly, how to live with them, not by confronting them directly, but by storing them away, sealed and separated from daily function. This compartment becomes crowded over time. This first close killing does not define you in a single moment. It begins a process, a slow adjustment to a reality where ending a life by hand is no longer unthinkable but possible, where the unimaginable has already occurred. And as you continue on your path, you understand that each time will be different, yet none will ever be easy. The body remembers, the mind adapts, the soul quietly bears the weight. After the body has been left behind, the work does not end, it simply changes its location. What was once external, physical, immediate, now turns inward, quiet, and persistent. You carry it with you as you move away, as you wash your hands, as you resume the appearance of an ordinary life. At first there is a strange clarity. Your thoughts feel sharp, ordered, almost calm. This is the echo of adrenaline, the body's way of keeping you functional. You move through the world efficiently, alert to danger, careful with every step. You know this state well. It fades slowly. When it does, something else takes its place. The mind begins to replay fragments. Not the entire act, rarely the entire act, but moments detached from sequence, a pressure in your palms, a sound that does not quite make sense, the sudden heaviness of silence. These fragments return without warning, intruding into unrelated moments. You learn not to fight them directly. Resistance gives them strength. Instead, you acknowledge their presence briefly, then guide your attention elsewhere. This technique is taught quietly, passed down by those who have survived longer than most. Sleep becomes unpredictable. Some nights, exhaustion claims you immediately. On others, you lie awake, eyes closed, listening to your own breathing. When dreams come, they are rarely narrative. They are sensations, weight, motion, stillness. You wake unsure why your heart is racing. You notice changes in yourself that are difficult to name. Food tastes different, sounds feel sharper, crowds feel heavier. You are more aware of vulnerability, your own and that of others. You see how easily life can be interrupted, how thin the margin truly is. There may be moments when emotion surfaces unexpectedly, a tightness in the chest, a sudden sadness with no clear source, or nothing at all, a flatness that worries you more than pain would. Emotional absence can feel like a kind of loss. You do not speak of these things. There is no language for them that feels safe. Among those who live this life, silence is the common response. To speak too openly risks unraveling control. Control is everything. Instead, you learn to compartmentalize more carefully. You imagine mental spaces where memories can be stored, sealed away from daily function. This technique works at first. Over time, the compartments fill. You begin to understand that the mind adapts not by erasing experience, but by dulling its impact. The sharp edge of revulsion softens, the shock diminishes. This adaptation allows survival, but it also distances you from ordinary emotional responses. You may test yourself quietly to see if you still feel as you once did. You observe your reactions to suffering not connected to your work, a public punishment, an injured animal, another person's grief. Sometimes you feel something, sometimes you do not. Both outcomes unsettle you. Guilt does not arrive cleanly, if it arrives at all. It comes in fragments mixed with justification, necessity, resignation. You remind yourself why the act was required. You remind yourself that refusal was not an option. These reminders do not erase doubt, but they keep it contained. There are moments when you imagine the life that ended, not in detail, detail is dangerous, but in outline. A routine interrupted, a place now quieter than before. You push these thoughts away gently. They lead nowhere useful. Instead, you focus on procedure, on preparation for the next task, on maintaining readiness. Purpose fills the space where reflection might grow too strong. Activity becomes a form of insulation. You notice that the world treats you the same as before. No one looks at you differently. No sign marks you as someone who has ended a life. This invisibility is necessary, yet it feels strange. You carry something immense and no one can see it. Over time, you realize that the act itself was not the hardest part. The hardest part is integration, learning how to exist with what you've done without letting it consume you or paralyze you. This balance requires constant adjustment. Some find solace in routine, others in repetition, a few in belief, though faith can be complicated by such acts. You may pray without asking forgiveness, simply asking for endurance. You also learn that memories fade unevenly. Some moments blur quickly. Others remain vivid, resistant to time. There is no pattern you can rely on. You accept this uncertainty as part of the cost. Gradually, killing up close becomes something you know you can do again. This realization is both reassuring and disturbing. Reassuring because it confirms your capability. Disturbing because it confirms your change. You are still yourself, but altered. The person you were before this act exists now only in fragments. The person you are becoming is shaped by repetition, restraint, and silence. When you think back on this first close killing, it no longer feels singular. It becomes part of a sequence, a beginning, not an exception. This understanding settles heavily, but steadily. You recognize that the mind's ability to endure is remarkable. You also recognize its limits. So you move forward carefully, aware that every act leaves residue even when performed perfectly. You carry this residue quietly, like everything else. And as you prepare for whatever comes next, you understand one final truth with clarity. The blade ends a life, but it is the memory that stays with you. When the immediate danger has passed, a different tension takes its place. It is quieter, less dramatic, but far more persistent. You have survived the act itself. You have escaped. You are alive. And yet, the world around you now feels altered, as if every familiar place has shifted slightly out of alignment. You return to ordinary spaces carrying extraordinary knowledge. Taverns murmur with conversation. Markets hum with bargaining. Life continues at its usual pace, unaware of what you have done. This indifference is unsettling. You move among people who do not know they are sharing space with someone who has crossed an invisible boundary. Silence becomes your greatest protection. You guard your words carefully, even more than before. Casual remarks feel dangerous. Jokes feel inappropriate. You listen more than you speak, measuring every response. The less you say, the less there is to betray you. Guilt does not announce itself clearly. It arrives in fragments, subtle and inconsistent. A tightening in the chest when you hear a familiar laugh. A sudden heaviness when you pass a place that resembles where it happened. These sensations do not form a coherent emotion, but they linger. You question yourself in quiet moments. Not dramatically, not philosophically, but practically. Was it necessary? Was it clean? Was it witnessed? These questions are safer than moral ones. They can be answered. Moral questions cannot. The risk of betrayal presses constantly at the edge of your awareness. Someone always knows something. A glimpse, a suspicion, a loose word spoken at the wrong time. You learn to watch others more closely now, not just targets, but allies, handlers, intermediaries. Trust becomes conditional and temporary. Even those who work alongside you are not fully safe. Knowledge is currency, and currency is traded. You assume that everyone has a threshold at which they would betray you. Hunger, fear, ambition. You plan accordingly. You're careful not to change your behavior too abruptly. Sudden withdrawal draws attention. Sudden confidence does the same. You aim for consistency, for a return to routine that feels natural. Blending back into normal life is a skill in itself. At times you sense that others are watching you. A glance held too long. A question phrased too carefully. You replay conversations in your mind, searching for missteps. Most of the time, these fears are unfounded, but the uncertainty never disappears entirely. You learn to live with this constant evaluation. It becomes background noise like hunger or fatigue. You do not panic. Panic would be visible. Instead, you observe, adjust, and continue. Guilt, when it surfaces more clearly, often arrives indirectly. You may find yourself avoiding certain situations, children, families, ordinary domestic scenes. These reminders of life uninterrupted feel strangely painful. You tell yourself that this avoidance is practical, not emotional. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is not. You're reminded quietly but firmly that what you have done must never be acknowledged. There will be no confession, no absolution offered openly. You carry responsibility alone. This isolation deepens the psychological weight. Faith, if it exists in your life, becomes complicated. You may pray, but carefully. You do not ask forgiveness in the usual sense. Instead, you ask for endurance, for steadiness, for silence. You ask not to be seen. The possibility of betrayal shapes your relationships profoundly. You keep distance even from those you might otherwise trust. You reveal nothing unnecessary. You understand that intimacy creates vulnerability. Vulnerability invites leverage. You also learn that guilt can be dangerous. If it weakens your discipline, if it makes you hesitate or confess, it becomes a liability. You work to contain it, to acknowledge it, without allowing it to govern your actions. Over time, something unsettling happens. The intensity of guilt begins to fade, not because you have resolved it, but because repetition dulls its edge. This realization troubles you more than guilt itself ever did. You wonder what it means to adapt so thoroughly. You remind yourself that survival requires this adaptation, that those who cannot contain their emotions do not last. The medieval world offers no space for open reckoning. Consequences are brutal and final. Still, there are nights when silence feels heavier than fear, when the absence of confession presses on you, when you imagine what would happen if you spoke openly, even briefly. These thoughts are quickly dismissed. Imagination is not safety. You accept that your life will always involve this tension. Guilt managed, not resolved. Silence maintained, not questioned. Betrayal anticipated, not forgiven. This is the price paid after the act, not public punishment, not immediate retribution, but a quiet vigilance that never fully relaxes. And as you continue forward, careful and controlled, you understand that survival now depends as much on what you do not say as on what you do. The blade may be hidden away, the act may be complete, but the risk remains, breathing softly beside you, reminding you that the past is never entirely past. There is a kind of quiet that follows you everywhere now. It is not the quiet of peaceful countryside or a monastery at dawn. It is the quiet of something unspoken, carried carefully, never placed down. You can be surrounded by voices and still feel it, like a thin veil between you and everyone else. Living with what you have done is not a single struggle, but a daily practice. Each morning you wake and remind yourself who you must be that day. Each evening you review what was said, what was seen, what might have been noticed. You live in repetition and self-checking, because self-checking is survival. At times you feel almost normal. You eat, you walk, you speak with the right tone. You appear tired in the same way everyone is tired. You listen to the same complaints about taxes, weather, sickness, shortages. You nod at familiar worries and keep your own contained. And then, without warning, the memory returns. Not as a narrative, but as a sensation. A particular pressure in your hand, the sound of breath halting, a flicker of torchlight on stone. These fragments appear briefly, then fade again, but they leave a residue of unease. You learn to manage this residue in small ways. Routine becomes a shield. Tasks, even mundane ones, keep the mind occupied. Cleaning gear, checking clothing, rehearsing rotes, preparing simple meals. These ordinary acts anchor you when the past threatens to rise too close to the surface. You discover that the medieval world offers few spaces for private reflection. Homes are crowded, streets are noisy. Even solitude can be dangerous. Yet you still find moments, before dawn, after midnight, in empty courtyards, in quiet corners of churches, where your mind has room to wander. In those moments, questions come, even if you try to avoid them. What kind of person does this? What have you become? Would you have recognized yourself years ago? These questions do not arrive loudly. They arrive softly, persistently, like water dripping into stone. You seldom answer them directly. Answers would require honesty, and honesty is dangerous. Instead, you turn toward practicality again. You remind yourself that you did what was demanded. That refusal would have meant death. That survival required compliance. These justifications are partly true and partly incomplete, but they are enough to keep you moving. You notice how your relationship to ordinary life has shifted. You observe people differently now. When you see a merchant bargaining, you notice how exposed his throat is when he laughs. When you see a guard leaning against a post, you measure how quickly he could react if startled. When you see lovers walking close together, you think of how little they understand about the fragility of their safety. This awareness does not make you cruel. It makes you separate. You begin to feel that you're no longer fully part of the world you move through. You are a presence within it, but not of it. Your life runs parallel to ordinary life, close enough to touch, but never truly joining. There's also the constant knowledge that what you have done can never be spoken aloud. Confession might bring relief, but it would also bring consequences. The medieval world is not gentle with those associated with secret violence. If discovered, you would not be given a quiet trial. You would be broken publicly, used as an example. This fear keeps your silence intact. Sometimes you attempt to soften the edges of your life by doing small acts of kindness. A coin to a beggar. A quiet warning to someone you suspect is in danger. These gestures do not erase what you have done, but they create a thin sense of balance, a way to feel briefly human. Other times, you avoid kindness entirely, fearing it will lead to attachment. Attachment leads to vulnerability. Vulnerability leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to death. The logic is cold, but effective. You come to understand that living with what you have done is not about finding peace. It is about maintaining stability. Peace is for those whose lives are open. Yours is not. As months pass, your memory of the first acts may blur at the edges. The emotional shock fades. The body adapts. This adaptation is necessary, yet it carries a quiet horror. You wonder whether this dulling means you're becoming inhuman. But then, a small thing brings emotion back unexpectedly. A child crying in the street. A widow's face at a funeral. A prayer whispered in desperation. These moments pierce through numbness and remind you that you are still capable of feeling, even if feeling is dangerous. You learn to let these moments pass without clinging to them. Clinging would lead to longing, and longing would lead to regret. Regret is a luxury your life cannot afford. There is also the practical matter of reputation. Even as you remain anonymous, rumours may circulate. People speak of unseen forces, of disappearances, of deaths that look like illness, but feel suspicious. You listen carefully for these whispers. They are signs of danger. When rumours grow too close to truth, you move. You change towns. You change names. You vanish from one life and appear in another, carrying your silence with you. In time, you realize that, after the act is not a phase that ends, it is permanent condition. Every act leaves residue. Every residue must be carried. You become skilled at carrying it, but it never becomes weightless. And yet, you continue. Not because you are untroubled, not because you are proud, but because survival in this world demands forward motion, and you have learned, painfully, how to keep moving, even when the past walks beside you. Sooner or later, the direction of danger reverses. You feel it before it is confirmed, in the subtle tightening of the world around you. Conversations grow shorter. Faces linger a moment too long. Questions are asked that do not need answers. The shadows you once used so carefully now feel thinner, less reliable. You have spent your life watching others. Now you begin to sense that someone is watching you. In medieval society, justice is not blind, nor is it patient. It is uneven, impulsive, and deeply influenced by power. When violence becomes too visible, when deaths accumulate without explanation, authorities feel compelled to respond. Not always to protect the innocent, but to reassert control. The hunt begins quietly. There are no proclamations at first, no public announcements. Instead, guards are posted more carefully. Informants are questioned. Taverns become listening posts. The machinery of suspicion grinds slowly but relentlessly. You learn to recognize the signs. A familiar innkeeper suddenly distant, a guard who asks your name twice, a stranger who seems too interested in your movements. None of these alone mean capture. Together they form a pattern you have learned to fear. You adjust immediately. Routes change. Timetables shift. You avoid places you once used freely. You become even more careful with words, with gestures, with presence. Yet vigilance has limits. Fatigue accumulates. No one can remain perfectly alert forever. The danger is not always official. Sometimes it comes from those like you, rival agents, disgruntled intermediaries, people who know just enough to profit from betrayal. In a world where information is currency, turning in an assassin can be highly rewarding. You understand this intimately. You have lived by exploiting vulnerability. Now you are vulnerable yourself. If suspicion hardens into certainty, the consequences are severe. Medieval justice has little interest in nuance. You will not be asked gently to explain yourself. You will be seized, restrained, displayed. The goal is not truth, but demonstration. Interrogation is not designed to uncover facts carefully. It is designed to produce confession, names, networks. Torture is a tool, openly acknowledged and widely used. Pain is believed to reveal truth, even when it does not. You know this, and it terrifies you. You have trained to endure pain. You have trained to resist fear. But torture is different. It is systematic. It is patient. It is designed to break not just the body, but the will. You imagine it often, unwillingly. The devices, the methods, the slow erosion of resistance. You tell yourself that you would endure, that you would remain silent, that you would protect what little remains of your autonomy. These thoughts are comforting but uncertain. No one knows their limits until they are tested. Public punishment is common. Executions are spectacles meant to instruct. Bodies are displayed. Confessions are read aloud, often extracted under duress. Guilt is assumed. Innocence is irrelevant once accusation takes hold. You know that if you are caught, your past will be reconstructed crudely. Actions simplified. Motives distorted. You will be reduced to a symbol. Traitor, murderer, heretic, threat. Complexity has no place in punishment. This knowledge shapes how you move through the world now. You plan exits obsessively. You imagine escape routes everywhere. You calculate how long it would take to disappear completely, and whether disappearance is even possible anymore. Fear returns with a new intensity. Not the fear of action, but the fear of exposure. You dream of capture, hands grabbing you in the dark, ropes tightening, voices demanding answers. You wake with your heart racing, breath shallow. These dreams feel too plausible to dismiss. You also become painfully aware of your own body's fragility. You imagine how it would respond to sustained pain, deprivation, humiliation. The body that was once your instrument of survival now feels like a liability. At the same time, you understand that justice in this world is selective. Many crimes go unpunished. Many killers live openly. But secret killers, those who undermine authority quietly, are intolerable. You represent disorder without spectacle. That makes you dangerous. You may consider fleeing far away, to another region, another language, another ruler's domain. But medieval borders are porous and unpredictable. Travel brings its own risks. Strangers attract attention. Accents betray origins. You weigh these options constantly. Stay and adapt, or flee and risk exposure. There is no safe choice, only degrees of danger. As pressure builds, you notice your own reactions shifting. You're quicker to startle, less tolerant of unpredictability. You scan faces constantly, searching for recognition. Paranoia creeps in, slow and corrosive. You remind yourself that caution is not paranoia if danger is real, and danger is real now. This phase of your life is defined by anticipation, not of action, but of consequence. You have always known that this path could end badly. Now, that knowledge feels closer, more tangible. You understand that being an assassin means accepting this eventual reversal. The hunter will be hunted, the unseen will be sought, the quiet will be dragged into the light, and as you move through the world under this growing shadow, you realize that survival now depends not on skill alone, but on luck, and luck is something no one can train. The net is tightening. You feel it in every glance, every pause, every unanswered question, and somewhere, whether you know it yet or not, someone has begun to speak your name, even if they do not know it is yours. It rarely happens the way you imagine it. There is no dramatic chase through narrow streets, no heroic final stand beneath torchlight. Capture comes quietly, efficiently, at a moment when your guard is lowered just enough to matter. It arrives disguised as routine. Perhaps it is a knock at the door you did not expect. Perhaps a hand grips your arm in a crowded street, firm and practiced. Perhaps you are surrounded before you even understand what is happening. In that instant, everything you have prepared for years collapses into a single realization. You're no longer in control. Restraint follows immediately. Ropes bite into wrists. Iron clasps close with dull finality. You're moved quickly, decisively, before confusion can spread. Medieval authorities understand the value of speed. Public scenes invite sympathy. Quiet arrests prevent resistance. Your surroundings blur as adrenaline floods your body. You catalogue details instinctively. Number of guards, exits, weapons. Even as you know, escape is unlikely. Still, training compels assessment. It is difficult to abandon habits built over a lifetime. You're taken to a place not meant for comfort. A cellar beneath a courthouse. A chamber within a fortress. A room that smells of damp stone, old sweat, and fear. Light is poor, air is heavy, time feels uncertain. At first, questions are asked calmly, names, origins, occupation. You give nothing of value. You answer carefully, minimally. Silence is your last defense. You remind yourself that endurance is possible, that pain can be resisted. Then the tone changes. Medieval interrogation is not subtle. It is not concerned with accuracy, only compliance. Confession is the goal, not truth. Pain is introduced methodically, escalating in measured steps. You're reminded that resistance prolongs suffering. Cooperation shortens it, or so they claim. The body reacts before the mind can intervene. Pain overwhelms thought. Breath becomes ragged. Muscles seize. You discover quickly that imagination never prepared you for the reality. Training helps, but only partially. Torture is designed to dismantle training. Between sessions, you are left alone. This is intentional. Isolation weakens resolve. You're given time to think, to anticipate what will come next. Fear grows during these pauses fed by uncertainty. You begin to understand why so few endure without breaking. Pain is relentless, but worse is the sense of inevitability. You are reminded that they have time. You do not. Confession becomes a temptation. Not because you want to speak, but because silence feels unbearable. You bargain internally. Small truths, partial lies, anything to reduce suffering. You struggle to maintain coherence under pressure. Names press against your thoughts, faces, voices, people you once knew. Protecting them requires strength you're not sure you possess. You realize with quiet horror that your loyalty has limits, even if you wish it did not. When words finally leave your mouth, they feel detached from you, as if spoken by someone else. You hear yourself speak and cannot quite believe it. The relief is immediate and shameful. Pain recedes briefly, control slips permanently, confessions are recorded carelessly, details are distorted, gaps are filled with assumptions. Your story is no longer yours. It is reshaped to fit expectations, to justify authority, to serve as warning. Public punishment follows. Medieval justice demands spectacle. You are displayed, bound, weakened. Charges are announced, crimes simplified, motives assigned. The crowd watches not to understand, but to be reassured that order is restored. You're reduced to a symbol, a cautionary tale, an example. As sentence is pronounced, there is little surprise left. You expected this outcome, even if you hope to avoid it. Death feels almost abstract now, distant behind layers of exhaustion. In the final hours, time behaves strangely. Moments stretch, then vanish. You notice small details with surprising clarity. The sound of footsteps, the texture of rope, the smell of smoke or rain. These sensations anchor you briefly to the present. You reflect, not dramatically, but quietly. There is no grand revelation, no sudden peace, just a steady awareness of what your life has been, of what it cost, of what it changed. You think of names you used to wear, of places you passed through unseen, of moments when escape felt possible. These memories drift through you without urgency. If fear returns now, it is muted. There's nothing left to prepare for. The future has narrowed completely. Acceptance settles in, not as comfort, but as stillness. When the end comes, it is swift or slow, depending on circumstance. Medieval punishment is rarely merciful, but it is decisive. Pain may return briefly, then sensation fades, silence follows, and with it, anonymity is finally complete. Your true name is lost. Your story is fragmented. What remains is rumor, caution, distortion. This is how the hunt ends, not with mystery, not with glory, but with exposure, confession, and disappearance. And if you are fortunate or unfortunate as enough to avoid this fate, you will live every day knowing how close it always is. Because for those who choose this path, capture is not an anomaly. It is an ending written into the beginning. If you live long enough, the work begins to change you in quieter ways, not through shock or fear, but through accumulation. Years pass, assignments blur together, faces fade. What remains is a body that has endured more than it was ever meant to, and a mind shaped by habits that no longer loosen easily. You notice age first in small things. Recovery takes longer. Cold settles deeper into your joints. Old injuries ache without warning. You move more carefully now, not from fear, but from experience. You know how easily a single mistake can end everything. Your usefulness is questioned subtly, not openly, not cruelly. Younger hands move faster. Younger minds absorb instruction more easily. You are still capable, but no longer ideal. This realization unsettles you more than danger ever did. You begin to receive different kinds of tasks, less direct action, more observation, advice given quietly, then ignored. You sense that you are being eased toward the margins, though no one says it aloud. In this world, fading away is preferable to becoming a liability. Regret surfaces differently with age. It is no longer sharp or emotional. It is reflective, almost tired. You think less about individual acts and more about the shape of your life as a whole. The years spent waiting, the names abandoned, the relationships never allowed to grow. You wonder who you might have been if circumstances had been different. This wondering is gentle, not desperate. You know such thoughts lead nowhere. Still, they return, especially in moments of quiet. There is also relief. You have survived what many did not. You have outlived rivals, handlers, enemies. Survival itself feels like an achievement, even if it came at a cost. You carry pride carefully, aware of how dangerous it can be. Fear has softened, not disappeared, but dulled. You know the risks too well to be surprised by them. You accept that capture or death could still come at any time. This acceptance brings a strange calm. You live more inwardly now. Movements are slower, words fewer. You avoid unnecessary attention instinctively. The world feels louder, faster, more reckless than you remember. You prefer the edges, the quiet spaces. You also understand something with clarity. There is no true escape from this life. Even if you stop acting, you cannot stop being what you have become. The instincts remain. The awareness remains. The memories remain. Aging does not free you from the past. It simply changes how you carry it. And as you continue forward, step by careful step, you realize that survival was never the same as salvation. It was merely continuation, a quieter endurance, a longer reckoning. At the end of such a life, there is no clear finish line. No announcement tells you that your last task has been completed. No voice confirms that danger has finally passed. Instead, the road simply grows quieter beneath your feet, until one day you realize you have been walking alone for a long time. Your body decides before your mind does. Movements slow, reflexes soften. You feel hesitation where there once was certainty. Not fear, fatigue. The kind that settles deep and does not leave after sleep. You begin to avoid situations that once felt manageable. You choose distance over proximity, observation over involvement. Others stop calling on you. At first gradually, then not at all. You are not dismissed openly. That would require acknowledgement. Instead, you are forgotten with intention. New names circulate. New hands take over. The world of quiet violence does not pause to honor longevity. It replaces it. Memory becomes your constant companion now. With fewer tasks to occupy your mind, the past rises more often. Not in dramatic sequences, but in impressions. Places you once waited. Voices you never learned to forget. Moments when you could have turned away and did not. You notice that memory has its own rhythm. Some events fade entirely. Others remain vivid, sharp despite the years. You stop trying to control which memories return. Control has exhausted itself. There is no one left to tell your story to. Those who knew fragments of it are gone, dead, or silent by necessity. Even if someone listened, there would be no reason to speak. Explanation does not undo consequence. Confession would arrive too late to matter. You consider what will remain of you. No children bearing your name. No trade you mastered openly. No place where your presence is remembered clearly. At best, a few distorted rumours. At worst, nothing at all. This realization is not frightening. is simply true. You spend more time in stillness now, sitting, watching light move across walls, listening to sounds that once would have triggered alertness, now merely marking time. You remain observant, but without urgency. If danger comes, it will come. You're no longer preparing endlessly for it. Faith, if it ever had a place in your life, becomes quieter too. You do not ask for forgiveness or reward. You ask for rest, for forgetting, for a softening of what remains sharp inside you. When the end finally approaches, through illness, weakness, or sudden chance, it does not feel dramatic. It feels like completion, a closing of effort. The body releases what it has been holding for too long. There is no audience, no reckoning spoken aloud, just a final stillness. And in that stillness, you understand something clearly. This life was never meant to be remembered. It was designed to erase itself, piece by piece, until nothing recognizable remained. You disappear the way you lived, quietly, without witnesses, and when the world continues without noticing, it does exactly what it always did, which in the end is the truest mark of the medieval assassin's life. Not glory, not legend, but silence. You can let the weight of this life slowly loosen now. The narrow streets fade, the stone walls soften, the smell of smoke and damp earth drifts away. Little by little, the medieval world releases you from its grip. You have walked beside someone who lived in secrecy, fear, and silence. You have felt the patience required to wait unseen, the closeness of violence, the long aftermath that followed every act. You have carried a life built not on honour or glory, but on endurance, concealment, and quiet compromise. This was not a heroic existence. It was not a powerful one. It was a life shaped by necessity, pressure, and narrowing choices. You have seen how a medieval assassin survived by erasing themselves, their name, their past, their future, until only function remained. You felt how every skill learned came with a cost, and how survival itself slowly became its own burden. Now gently, you return to your own time. You feel the safety of distance, the softness of stillness, the quiet certainty that this world, for all its troubles, no longer demands such lives from you. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders relax. Let the images dissolve like mist at dawn. And ask yourself quietly, without judgment, would you have survived in this world, and if you had, at what price? Thank you for travelling through history tonight with everyday life in history. If this journey comforted you or helped you drift closer to sleep, consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and leaving a small comment telling where you're listening from tonight. Now you can rest. The shadows are behind you.